All right. Friday morning, we're on with Ibra Toure. So I'm going to throw out a couple of names and see if people can guess where you're originally from. So, and out of these, I want you to pick who you. Well, you don't have to pick out of these, but it might be someone you think's better. But let's go with Solomon Kalou, Bakayoko, Fofana, Yaya Toure, or Didier Drogba. Is one of those the best of all time, or is there someone that we don't know about?
All great names. I don't have a choice, and it pains me to say that as an Arsenal fan, but I have to go with DJ Drogba. DJ Drogba is he's a unique one.
Yeah, I saw him. I was lucky enough. I got to see him play. Actually, I haven't been back to England for 11 years, but last time we went to, my dad's a Chelsea fan. We went to see Chelsea versus Norwich, and I got to see, yeah. And then, continuing the list, I was just looking up, doing a little research, and Nicola Pepe, Will Zaha, Serge Aurier, Gavinho, Bailly, bro, what is going on in Cote d'Ivoire? You are churning out players like no one's business. There's people I didn't even know from Cote d'Ivoire. The list goes on and on and on. So
it's a lot of individual talent. It's a football country. Listen, if you go there, you'll see it. It's in the street everywhere. Everywhere you look, and it doesn't matter. The time doesn't matter. It's being played anywhere at any point during the day. It's just happening. You turn your head left, right, doesn't matter. They don't need anything. They don't need goals, right? They'll create goals. They'll just put rocks and play there, right?
So you know what? I wanted to chat to you about a lot of that stuff. So I just want to share something quickly for everybody. So for those of you who are not very well up on your geography, our Ibra, my guest today, is from a country called Cote d'Ivoire, which I think is translates to the Ivory Coast. Is that correct?
That's very correct.
And why is it called the Ivory Coast? Is it something to do with the elephant trade, or?
Yep, elephant trade. The ivory, obviously, a big. Used to be a big commodity there.
So Cote d'Ivoire is West Africa, kind of on the coast between you. I didn't realize how many different countries you bordered. You Liberia, Ghana, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and even, is that Mali to the north there?
That's Mali to the north, yep. That's Mali to the north right there.
Did not realize how big Mali was compared to all the coastal countries. So anyway, there's everyone's geography lesson for the day. Now you're now in you're in Rockville, Maryland.
John, I'm now in Rockville, Maryland, and that's recent. I was in Philly the last 2 years. I was coaching in a club. I was coaching with PA Rush in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. And I was there for 2 years, and my wife, who is really originally from this area, so from the Rockville, Bethesda-ish area in Maryland, got a job here. And in these COVID times, we are very lucky, right? That that she's able to have a job, and so it's an opportunity that we took. So we moved around here. So that's a recent move for me. But I'm familiar with the Maryland area because I went to high school in Maryland, actually. So it's kind of like, it feels like I'm coming back home in a way.
So tell me, what's your story? How did you come to the States? What age were you? I think you said it was 2003?
2003. I was 14. So I came to the States just to start going to high school.
Okay.
And like I said, obviously I was in a country where that's all we were doing, right? That's literally all we were doing. We were just playing the game. And so when I moved here, I transitioned into that. Here.
Was that something that you, like, how did you feel about moving over here? Was that something you wanted to do, or was it mum and dad that brought you over? Or
it was a decision. It was a decision made by my parents. At the time, there was a lot of political tensions in the Ivory Coast, and that's something that unfortunately is very common in African countries, especially in election times. It's just a lot of chaos, and so my things got to a point where there was a lot of uncertainty in the countries as far as school is concerned and things like that. And so for my parents, it was, and I was lucky enough that I already had siblings and relatives here in the States.
Okay.
So my parents made the decision, and I'm very thankful for that, to say, hey, time for you to go. For you to get out of here.
Did they stay, Ibra? And you came on?
So they stayed, and I moved here, but again, I had a chance to come here and stay with family right away. And then it took them a little bit of time before they were able to also make the move. But now they're back home. They came here as older parents, and
they're not having this going back.
Yeah, they try to adapt to the American life, but eventually they were like, listen, this is not for us. You're a grown man now. Once I graduated high school, they were like, you're a grown man now. Take care of yourself. If you need us, you know where to find us.
Yeah, that's, again, right? It's not a common people from over here, and I just don't understand what that must be. I mean, 14 years old, like, see ya, bye. Now, so your mom and dad came over, and how long did they stay, bro?
My mom stayed more permanently. My dad was always back and forth. He was always back and forth. But my mom stayed more permanently, again, until I graduated high school. And once I graduated high school, it was like, she hated the cold weather. She absolutely hated the cold weather. And so...
I tell you what, Ibra, I must be a bit of African in me, because I hate the cold weather too.
But John,
I love it here, but if I could get rid of the...
You in Canada, John. How are you? How are you adapting?
I'm like a little bear. I go into my little hole in December. I don't come out till April. What was it that your mum and dad that just didn't? What did they not like, or what did they like more about their life in Côte d'Ivoire, or was it just they were too old to change?
My dad is a very social person. He's the guy that needs to interact with everybody.
Okay.
And when he came here, he doesn't speak the language, so things got rough for him. Right? He would literally go out and speak to people in French, and I would have to be like, Dad, I'm pretty sure these guys don't understand anything that you say. But he didn't care, right? He didn't care. He's just like, I gotta get my point across, right? It doesn't matter.
Is French the official language of Côte d'Ivoire?
French is the official language in Côte d'Ivoire.
Ibra, you should have sent him up here to Montreal. We'd have taken it. Would have been fun. It's funny because I live in a small town, and it has a very French influence. So all my three kids, they all go to all French school.
Okay.
So now I'm good at it. See, now another thing, if I go to Côte d'Ivoire, I can use them as my spies. Tell me what people are saying about me.
You'll be good there, but let me warn you: if you go to Côte d'Ivoire, you don't ever leave. That's the way life works.
Yeah.
If you listen, it took me once I moved here, it took me 10 years to go back, and when I went back, I didn't want to hear about America anymore. I still ended up coming back, of course, but there's the idea that, right, that people are living in poor conditions over there, but let me tell you, John, people are enjoying life over there. You know what I mean?
You know what? I think there's a common misconception both ways, right? I mean, I've done a little bit of traveling, and I think there's a common misconception that, you know, America's the greatest country in the world and everyone lives in absolute, luxury.
Yeah.
Same as Canada and probably England, and that the rest of the world, well, you know, there's one person in a palace in Cote d'Ivoire and everyone else is living in, you know, poverty. And I mean, having traveled through quite a lot of the US, I can tell you that is not true. There's a lot of people living in poverty in the US too. So
There is.
So Cote d'Ivoire is about 25.07 million people. So fairly, that's about 10 million smaller than population of Canada. Here's what's going to blow. I think it'll probably blow my mind. How big is it? Because here, let me grab that map up again. Because on the map here, like, it looks pretty small, right? Like in comparison to the other countries in landmass. Right. How long would it take you to, let's say, drive from the north border in Mali all the way down to the coast?
It'll take you about 10 hours, but you also have to take into consideration the fact that the roads there are not the roads that are here in Canada, right? There's a lot of work that needs to be done with the road, but it'll take you right now. And that's a trip that I know for a fact. That's a trip that my dad does very often because we are originally from the north part of the country, and so that's a trip that we've done very often as that.
So it's probably about, what would you say, a fifth of the size of the US?
Yeah.
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 Let's talk. I want you to tell me what I mean. We started there, but what does soccer look like in Cote d'Ivoire? Like for kids, like, is there any organized structure, clubs? Is everyone just like? Maybe you could give us a kind of satellite, bird's eye view of the top, the most expensive level of youth soccer, if there is any, the most organized to the least organized, and what's it like compared to what we're used to here?
Of course, it's very different. So I have to talk about. Obviously, things have changed, right? Since I've been there, things have drastically changed. But this is what I know about it. I know that it's very different than the structure here in the US. Right. Because what you see is, because we don't have 10,000 sports, it's going to be relatively easy for kids over there to grow up with that love of football, okay. Right? That's what they see on TV. That's just what they see on TV. When they turn off the TV, that's what they're talking about with their friends. When they're not talking about it with their friends, they're playing video games. So it's very, very, very heavy in the culture of the country. And so what you see is there is a huge pickup culture, right? Where it's people just play, kids just play.
So as soccer as a sport doesn't compete like it does over here with basketball, football. No. Like what else is Cote d'Ivoire in? Like,
basketball is coming up. Like I think, like in most countries, right? Like basketball, I think is a sport that's growing up with the NBA. That's growing up from an international standpoint. There has also been a couple of track track athletes that have had good success in the last couple of Olympics, and you see that the interest there has been growing as well, but it's not even close.
No,
it's not even close as far as what's the main sport. It's not even close.
And what predominantly, is there a part of the world where like Cote d'Ivoire follows soccer more? Is it more England and the Premier League, because a lot of the players from Cote d'Ivoire went there, or did also the French and Spanish leagues?
That's a great question, John. So we grew up watching the French league.
Okay.
The French league, Ligue 1, is what's what's available. It's what everybody has access to. Again, things are changing. I'm sure now, I mean, I've been there the last couple of years. Now, obviously, you have access to more things. But definitely growing up, there was easy access to League 1. But also at the time when I was growing up at the time, that was early early to mid 90s. That was Serie A was right. Serie A was the league, right, where everybody was watching. If you were not watching Serie A, there was something wrong with you.
Is now the other? I'm going to take a leap here. Was the reason you grew up like watching Ligue 1? Is that because of the link with your French heritage?
It's exactly that.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. It's the French connection and the fact that, right, that's what.
At least the French left you something decent, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, okay. So yeah, so you say one aspect of the development puzzle is just people watch, they're nuts about soccer. There's not as many distractions. It's not like you probably don't have kids saying, "Oh, I want to go try hockey," and I'm going to play. It's basically like if you're athletic, you're going to go.
Yeah.
So what? Tell people, like, maybe tell me, like, what? Let's take you for an example. How did you get involved, or what was your, what was soccer like for you? Like, when did you first start playing? Like, then what was your soccer experience in Côte d'Ivoire? And was your family from, like, are you very, very wealthy? Are you middle class? Like, are you poor? Like, what did that look like?
That's so John, my family is somewhere between middle class and rich in Ivory Coast. I can say that, and it's it's the work that they put in. It's the work that my parents put in. But what I remember, John, is I remember my first memory, my first soccer memory. Okay, I'll tell you. 1994, that final, that Brazil-Italy final.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I remember how things went down. I remember the Italians losing in penalties. I remember just tears and people crying, and I remember my family, just like the whole family, being around the TV watching that game, right? Like those are the first moments that I remember, right? My whole family, my dad, my uncles, being around the TV watching that game, and the reaction, and the reaction and the excitement and the feeling. And then after that, right, like for me, that's the moment when as a kid you kind of realize that, like, this is kind of cool, right? Like, everybody loves this. You know what I mean? This is when you realize that your people, the whole country loves this.
What are you, like, 5 then? 5 years old?
Yeah.
And were you? Do you have brothers and sisters?
I had a brother. I had an older brother, and also I'm the youngest.
Were like, before that age, were you kicking a ball around at all, or?
I honestly, John, I don't remember kicking the ball at all before that. But after that, it's almost like literally that's my first soccer memory. Right? That's when I remember that, like, there was a click where I was like, this is a cool game, and then it just takes off, right? It just takes off in the neighborhood.
So then your mum and dad went and signed you up at the local mega club, and that was it.
No such thing, John. No such thing. Let me tell you, neighborhood full of kids. What ends up happening naturally? Self-organization, right? Like, all of us as kids just gravitated towards the same thing. It was just one ball rolling in the neighborhood, all the kids were out, just running behind it, playing the most simple game that we could play. Let me tell you, no structure, right? The most simple game, and something that I'll never forget. One ball, 20 or 30 kids. If you get the ball, you have 20 kids coming at you because they want the ball. You're gonna try to do everything to keep the ball, because you know that if you lose it, you gotta go and get it back. Right?
So you got one goalkeeper, and it's basically like a 20v1. Whoever gets it, if you score, then what are you? Did you keep playing, or?
And so listen. Sometimes we did it without even goals. right? Where the idea is not scoring. The idea is you got to dribble as many people as you can. You got to keep the ball for as long as you can. So literally, there was sometimes we will create those games where the intention was not even scoring. It was like dribble. Right? And it's part of the culture. Part of the culture. The Ivory Coast is big on like players that play with that style, that have like flair, that love to dribble, right? Step overs, all kind of crazy moves. That's the culture. That's the people that live there. That's their personalities.
Wilf Zaha then.
Exactly.
Now, where are you playing this game?
I was fortunate to live in a neighborhood where there was a field literally boarding my house. There was a field, but there was also we were also playing those games like in the streets, like literally in the alleys. We didn't need let's just say that we didn't need a proper structures or any place where there was space. It was game. It was on.
And this is like, I'm assuming kids of all ages,
kids of all ages, yep. Kids of all ages. Right, doesn't matter. I'm 5 years older than my brother. We were playing in the same group. I'm 5 years younger than my brother, and we were all playing together.
What do you think you learned from that, or what do you think kids learn from that environment that maybe our kids here don't learn?
Oh my God, John.
Come on, lock that one up for you.
Let me tell you. Let me tell you, John, you can't even, and I have these conversations with my players all the time because, you know, I have a kid come to me and ask me how to do a move. And in my head, that's like my head would just explode because I can't imagine having, you know, going to somebody at the age, you know, in that environment where I was, right? Like we didn't need to do that because what would happen is we'll go and watch those games. And when you know, you have a favorite player, you see that player do that move. When the game ends, right, we were lucky enough that just when the game ends, that's when we'll just get out, boom. And then you're trying everything that you saw on TV. You're literally just going out and do it. So there's nobody to teach you how to do a move. You just gotta figure it out. You gotta take it. You gotta try it. You gotta see when it works. If it doesn't work, whatever. It's unbelievable the amount of things that you can learn in that show. It was free play. It was free play.
Are you also so you're the number one? What amazes me, even back then, we're talking like late 90s, that you had in Côte d'Ivoire, you have football on TV. And number two, so were you also, like within the game that you were playing, were you also looking at older kids or the kids who you thought were the best in the group and trying to copy them as well? Or was it just...
In a way, yes. But I think, John, I think what also happens, you know, at those young ages is I think you start realizing what you're good at. And then maybe you quickly realize that, like, hey, this kid that's over there and that's dribbling 100 people, that's what he's good at. Maybe I want to be as good as him. I would like to be able to do it. I don't know if I can, right? I'll try it every now and then. I'm not as good as him. There's a lot of respect for that kid, right? Like, that's the kid that the second you guys get to the field and you're setting up and you're wanting to make teams, that's the kid that everybody's like, hey, I want this kid on my team, right? The kid that you know is going to dribble like 100 people and score.
Yeah, that was me. That was me, Ibra. I was always picked first. So you're the other thing that strikes me about that is you're talking about there's 20, 30 kids.
Yep.
And you have a field, but it doesn't sound. And also, you're playing in streets, obviously. So that's a different size and shape and restriction. But it doesn't sound like you're typically organizing into an 11v11 game. So that begs the question over here, why are we so worried about game, you know, number one, by the sounds of it, why are we so worried about even playing formal games? And then why are we putting such constraints on kids with number, like 5v5 or 7v7, like the game you just explained there, which was 20v1. What do you think the reaction would be if you rolled up a practice tomorrow night and you ran that? What do you think the reaction from the parents would be?
I think it's very funny, John. It's funny actually that you said that, because I think even in and this is something that I think about often. I think even in what I would call the formal structure of coaching education in the US, right? They will usually preach the idea of one kid and one ball, right? Like one kid and one ball, one kid and one ball, right? And I understand there's a difference in the cultures, and I totally understand that. But I think it's funny that you said that, John, because I think in that environment where I was, the idea of like one kid and 20, the idea of 20 kids and one ball was fantastic, right? And then it's what you and I talked about, where it naturally just puts certain things, gives you certain ideas, forces you to take care of the ball more, for example, right? Because you know that if you're losing that ball, you're not seeing it again for another 5 minutes.
And it sounds like you're gonna have to work way harder to get it.
Right, but also think about it, John. In a game like that, you are also going to have eventually you're gonna lose the ball, of course. But you also gonna have a lot of repetitions with some success, right? Because what you also see is a kid dribble 3 or 4 people and then lose the ball. You see a kid dribble 3 or 4 people and then lose the ball, right? But
it's almost like overloading the difficulty,
right?
So that when you do get into a regular 1v1 situation, you're like, oh, I just got to beat the one person.
Exactly.
Not
exactly, right? I've done this before 10 times worse, so yeah. I'm good, right? So I think about that often, because when I'm thinking about the same game, I'm thinking it'll probably be frowned upon, right? Like we're in formal coaching education, at least here in the US.
So on top of that, like I said, the argument would be then, like I'm sure that a lot of people here would say, yeah, but after that you were probably playing with the ball yourself like all the time, right? Is that the case?
Right. It is the case. It is the case. And again, I think that is one of the challenges. For in the US for sure. I think it is. I know I'm gonna be very realistic. The kids that I'm coaching, I know that 99% of them are not touching a ball until they come into practice. I know that.
So what do you think some of the reasons were that you were going away, and was it, because I know some people probably say, oh yeah, well it was generational, you didn't have PlayStation and all this shit.
Yeah.
Was it just so that you could have more success in those games? Because you had to, like, if you sucked and you're playing 1v20, like I'm sure if you got the ball, you lost it straight away. What was the motivation to go practice on your own? Because I agree, it's a huge problem here.
Yeah. So this is what I think, John, and it's something that's also a little bit of a mystery for me. It's things that I always think about. If I take my example, for example, I have to, and all the kids that were in that neighborhood, right, that I grew up with, and many other kids that I knew there, I know for a fact that the culture is a big part of it, right? Like I said, like we for us, if you say sports, you say football, right? And so those were the people that for us were the people that we were looking up to. Like seriously, an Ivorian football player is more of a celebrity than the Ivorian president. Yeah. And that's a fact.
It seems to me like, again, like from where I grew up too, right? It's similar. I don't think it's as predominant like soccer.
Okay.
But for me, like here, living in Canada and the US now for 20 years, it just seems like they're trying to manufacture culture, right? They're trying they're trying to do the best they can within their clubs.
Yeah.
But I just don't think they've realized that you can't, I don't know. I don't think you can create culture on that level just within a club. Like we've tried doing lots of things, right? Where we've introduced kids to the names of the teams and here, follow a team. But
it's hard.
It's almost like you said, like unless you have that 1994 World Cup moment where everyone around you is just like, this is what it's about.
Yeah. It's tough.
And you can bring the World Cup here. You can, you can have soccer on TV.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly hard to.
It is.
To make culture. Either you have it or you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. It's very tough. Listen, we didn't in that environment, we didn't need parents to tell us, hey, you need to go and practice on this. It was like, what? If anything, it was the opposite. It was parents trying to pull you away from the game.
Right.
Because it's like, hey, there are other things that are bigger, right? Like your school and all that stuff. Right. So it's in a way, it's so funny. Right. But I know for a fact that, and this is something that I've been struggling with a little bit, and I'm still trying to find the best way of what can I do to motivate my players to love the game more, as in not just come and do it at practice, right? Because it's life is too easy if you just do that, right? Like, are you watching the game outside of that? Are you are you working on certain skills outside of just practice? Because if you're not doing those things, training just twice a week, that's hard. That's hard, John.
Yeah, and I mean I face the same challenges, Ibra, and I'm getting to the point where I think I look at it more of how do I squeeze the most out of what I've got, right?
Yeah.
So if all I've got is a kid that comes from a non-soccer background, non-soccer family, brothers, sisters, parents are not interested in the game, right? And there's no external exposure, and all I'm going to get is that kid 2 times a week, right? Then I'm to the point now where I kind of view my job and my success as what's the maximum I can get.
Yeah.
What's the maximum I can help this player do in that time? And really, I think that's one of the things that people don't, maybe coaches in other countries don't understand, is that it's a huge frustration for people that are just so in love with the game, right? To have people around them that just don't share that passion, right? Like it's almost like my kids are the same. My kids are like immersed in it, and still it's, if they go pick up a ball and go do a little bit, I mean, they'll stay and do a bit after practice and stuff like that, but it's rare that they'll go and, get a ball and just go practice. Yeah. I mean, even during when we were in our first lockdown, I was trying to encourage them to go do some passing, some juggles, and it's just, if it ain't there, it ain't there. I don't know what you can do.
It's tough, John. I had an interesting debate with one of my good friends that was also a co-worker at the time. He was in the previous club where I was working, and one of the things that the club was trying to do is they were trying to push the idea of homework, right? So it's, hey, we'll give kids homework, as in, here you have to do those videos and you have to post it here and you have to post it there, and we'll give you a challenge on the videos and all that stuff, right? So there were a couple of individuals that were very high on this idea, right? On this idea that we're gonna do this, we're gonna give kids homework, and that's gonna force them to do it. And for me, I was one of the few person that was like, I don't think that's the right thing to do. And the reason why I was saying that is my mentality is, if someone had done that to me as a kid, like, and I understand that, culture and time and all that stuff, right? But if someone had done that to me as a kid, where it was like homework, I think it would have actually turned me off from the game. I think I would have been like, hey, listen, I don't need you to give me homework. Like you know what I mean? Like, I don't need that. You know what I'm saying? And so that was always, and eventually what happened is the club ended up walking away from the idea because it actually became a burden for parents. Because with the younger kids especially, right, it ended up being a thing where parents always had to go and upload a video and upload this and upload that, and eventually, eventually it became one of those failed attempts where it was like, okay, we came up with this idea, nah, it didn't work.
Do you think that's one of our problems here, though, that everything we do now has to be like intrinsically motivated, right? There has to be some kind of reward attached to it, and I've got to get something for it. Whereas, and I'm not going to say when we grew up, but in other cultures, maybe they either can't afford to, or it's not their culture, but there is just this. It's almost like we have to bribe kids to do shit.
Yeah.
Right, and it's okay. Well, we have this challenge. The winner gets this.
Right.
And,
exactly.
and really, like, you look at where you grew up, right? The reward was, I got to get better.
I got to get better at
it. Because I'm going to be playing against 19 kids tomorrow.
Right.
And I'm the youngest.
Right.
And there's just, it seems, I mean, I think you're right. Who wants to do homework? Like,
yeah.
Number one, who wants to do homework? And number two, it's how do we, I mean, that is a challenge, right? How do you find a way to get players to do stuff outside of practice? But this is where it comes back to culture, right?
It comes back to culture,
sure,
exactly.
I'm sure when you were growing up, right, your big brother just dragged you out and said, Ibra, come on, let's get out of the house because mom and dad are going to kill us. Let's go take a ball. And other people were doing it, right? It was normal.
Yep.
Whereas here, it's not the norm. So we're trying to manufacture this love of the game. And
and it's what you talked about, John. The idea too of having a sibling, that's huge. That's huge if you have a sibling. And I've noticed that even in the players that I'm coaching, and in the number of families that I had a chance to work with, is I noticed that kids that had a sibling and that also where the sibling was also playing, I noticed that it made a world of a difference on certain kids where you could just tell, right? Like, there's something going on with this kid. Like, he's right. It's happening at home. It's happening informally. It's happening in places where this kid is picking things up that I'm not even teaching him. He's just picking it up because he's just doing it and doing it and doing it.
Yeah, each of my girls, like, as they reach the same age, are progressively better. Like, my youngest at 8 is better than my middle one was at 8, and better than my oldest at 8, because she's, number one, been around it more, right? And just watching her sisters, playing against them, and siblings don't take no prisoners, right?
Of course.
They're not like mom and dad where it's like, oh, go easy and you let you score a goal. It's like, which is probably, again, the same as your 19v1 game.
Right. It is.
Like, no one was like, oh, to go easy on poor little Ibra because he's younger. They were probably like, cool, I can get the ball now.
Everybody wanted to win. Yeah. Everybody wanted to win. But again, in a different way, right? Like, in a different way. In not in a way of like, I want to win because I want to win the trophy and I want to be in a way where everybody, you want to have bragging rights, right? It's like, hey, I'm the best at this. Come get me. You know what I mean? Like, come at me. I'm the best at it. The whole neighborhood is gonna know that I'm the best at it, and you can't beat me.
So 5 years old, you watched the '94 World Cup. You're like, all right, gotta really get in. What was your next? Like, what was your first introduction? How old were you when it came to like kind of anything that looked like organized soccer, and what did it look like?
So you know what's funny, John? I never played organized soccer in Côte d'Ivoire. Never. I never played for. My first experience with organized soccer is when I moved to the United States and I got to high school, and there was a guy that was there, and we as kids looked at him and there was like, this is your coach. And in my head, I was like, wait, we need somebody to tell us what to do? Like, why? We don't need anybody. Why is there somebody that's a coach? We don't need that. You know, that was my first experience. My first time playing high school soccer was my first time playing organized soccer.
So,
and
did it just not exist in Cote d'Ivoire?
It did exist in Cote d'Ivoire, but I think the fact that I was in an environment where I was already doing it every day anyways created the situation where I never went out. And I guess my parents never felt the need that they needed to go out and sign me. And maybe it's also because I wasn't exactly a world-class player. You know, I'm sure that was linked too, right? So I was doing it for fun, but I was doing it every day, right? And I was doing it in that environment where there was just the freedom to experiment, the freedom to just.
So again, like a kind of another cultural difference then, like where parents just don't feel that that's a priority.
Yeah.
Was there soccer in? Did you have soccer at school? Like
we had soccer at school, and that was very similar, right? That was organized by the kids. So the kids, what you will see is in the teams at school, the older kids will organize things, and the other kids will go along, right? And so sometimes schools will have to play against other schools, but it wasn't organized formal football.
So obviously, I guessed you would have played soccer at school, but
right.
What is school versus school? Did that happen?
Yep, that did happen. And there again, you're playing for pride, you're playing for bragging rights, you're playing to be able to say, hey, this school came over to our school, or we went over there and we beat them.
But what did that look like? Like, did you guys practice all the time, or how was the team selected?
Our practices, the kids were usually selected by, it was a combination of the players and someone that ended up being the coach, but that really wasn't coaching. That was more of like the adults that was there. You know what I mean? So, but what you will see is, you will quickly, in those environments, you will quickly find out the best players. They'll recognize each other. Everybody will things just happen very naturally in that environment, right? Where the kids kind of recognize who's good at what, who's good at doing what, and they just self-organize. It was self-organization. It was kids organizing kids, and creating the situations where it's like, okay, we're good. You know, very, very different. Very, very different than here. But John, things have changed a little bit because
I was going to say, what does it look like now? How has it changed?
Things have changed a little bit because obviously the game is growing, and people have seen the tremendous success that generation had, right? Like the Yaya Toures and the Kolo Toures and the Dogbas and all those guys. So now you see efforts to try to create more formal structures, right? So you're going to see, for example, more academies. You see more academies, for example. But this is the funny thing for me, John. This is the funny thing, and it's still very.
Sorry. What is a soccer academy in Cote d'Ivoire? Like what? Explain what that means.
Okay, the biggest is the ASEC Mimosa Academy. Now, ASEC Mimosa is the biggest club in Cote d'Ivoire. Okay, that's the team. A number of those players came up from that academy. Okay,
a professional team?
Yeah, they came up from. It's a professional team that was the first team there that really went with the idea of, we're gonna play young players. We're gonna go very young. We're gonna play young players, and we're gonna have success with them. And so, once they were able to produce players like that, things blew up for them. So that academy is a professional team, but they have an academy, and that's the biggest in Cote d'Ivoire. Now,
okay.
Now you also see more and more. You see more and more academies, more and more people, but it's more academies that are created by individuals.
Okay.
Okay, so you see, for example, some of those players have created academies. But I think that we and that's what I was gonna say. I think the what I'm very curious to see is, with the rise of those formal academies, I'm very curious to see if they are going to be able to produce the talent that they were able to produce when they were, I don't know if I should say less intentional about it, but when things were a little bit more free, when the structure that was there was a little bit more,
it was more organic, right?
Right, it was more organic, exactly. Right.
I think
that's the next thing for me. And right now, I think right now there's no question that they are struggling, because all those players that you're talking about, the Nicolas Pepes and the Wilfried Zaha, all these players are actually not pure Ivorian products. They are actually not. Right, like Wilfried Zaha only, I think the when he agreed to play for Ivory Coast, I think he may have been like the second time or the third time that he ever went there. Right, so you can't credit Ivorian football for the development of Wilfried Zaha. You can't.
No.
Right, and it's the same thing for Nicolas Pepe. You can't. So right now, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the national team starting to make that shift of not being able to produce local talent, and instead going for the players that have the double nationality, but that are maybe not going to get called up for England, or maybe not going to get called up for France. And you also see it in the football that's being produced, because you see those number of individual players come together, but then they don't practice together. So then everything becomes, you know.
My thoughts were maybe you develop players, but it'll be, do you think it will be a different type of player? Because once they're taken out of that environment that you grew up in, and we know what's going to happen when they're put into a structured environment, it's a different type of player that produces, I think.
It is, John. And listen, John, I also don't want to make it sound like it's terrible to play in a structured environment. I don't think it is. I think that when you look at African players as a whole, you can actually see that there is something from the structured environment that they do need. I think that's the universal verdict on African teams, is sometimes the lack of organization when they play.
There's culture for you. I'm gonna force soccer upon my girls. He doesn't look like a very good player to me, though. Get rid of him. I think the problem becomes when, and this is what we encounter over here, right, is that the sheltered environment is the only environment.
Yeah. A balance. You need balance.
I mean, I was talking to, I had a really good discussion with Mutanda, he's a Columbus Crew MLS Academy, and we were having the same discussion about, what did he call it? That the environments that our kids play in are very cleansed, or I can't remember the word he used, but sanitized.
Yeah.
Right? They're very sanitized. There's no rocks on the field. Like everything's perfect. And yeah, I mean, that can be beneficial, but I think there's also something they miss from that.
It shapes their personalities.
Yeah, I mean,
it shapes the players' personalities.
I don't think people understand like the adversity that other players in other countries have to battle to get to the top, right?
Yeah.
Here it's just, there's just the desire level is night and day.
It's different.
So you're starting to see more academies over there. What about, are there local youth clubs now? Like what?
There's a constant struggle with the National League, where they're trying to grow it, but I think they are struggling to get people into the stadiums. In that sense, I think they're struggling a bit. But I'm pretty sure there are more local teams now. And like I said, I'm pretty sure that there are more opportunities to play in environments that are more structured than the one I played in, for sure. There has to be. I don't know that for a fact, but I think there has to be.
Right, I got to do some research on that. It almost sounds like it'll be interesting to follow the next, like you said, the generation of players and the whole academy model, like might almost be I hate to say it, but an anti-development model, right?
I completely agree with you, John. I completely agree with you. I'm very curious to see it. Or I think it's exactly what you said. I think at best it's going to produce a different type of players. Unless you have that academy that is able to find the balance, right? That is able to find the balance between, hey, we'll find the right balance between the structured environment and also, having the structure in the right places, right? Because again, I think that there are a lot of African teams that are suffering from, sometimes you can see that, and you always see that in African players, that the individual talent is fantastic, but the part you're not gonna see an African team play like Barcelona. You're not gonna be able to see that. You're just not gonna be able to see that.
No,
I think that's the structure that's missing, right? Or you're going to see African teams struggle a lot with the defensive organization side of the game, because you need some structure there to be able to, to be able to really have success in international competition. You need to have a very good defensive structure. And so that's what you tend to see. You tend to see African teams have loads of individual talent because they have players that just play in those environments where it's very structured, boom, boom, boom. The more collective part of the game is where they tend to struggle.
Yeah.
So that for me is the clearest indication that you need both. You need both.
Yeah, I think that the question is at what age, right?
Yeah,
that's something I struggle with here, right?
Yeah.
As we've got, I think the environments we have here and the opportunities for kids are fantastic. I still get this feeling that it starts too young.
I agree.
That we almost need the 20v1, up until 13, 14, and then
I agree, John. Or at least, hey, here is a ball. It's fine. You guys can play 3v3 or whatever, but just play. Just play. I'm not going in to give you any instructions in terms of where you should be, where you should. Just play. Play. Try things. Hey, I'm not gonna get down on you if you try to go. Just play the game.
But I think that do you find like the underlying problem is again it's not the kids, it's the adult expectation, right? Because we've created this
100%.
model where you've paid money to do your coaching badges, you're a professional coach, and now the parents are paying you to be in charge of their kids. And if we just say, well, playing, I'm not going to do too much, it's seen as that you have no value, right? Whereas really what we're trying to do is recreate what these kids should doing on their own everywhere else.
Right. But and it's also, John, it's also recognizing the age and recognizing that this is a long-term thing, right? You have some parents that are getting into it, and at U8 they're trying to get the kids to win every competition and to beat everybody.
What is it called? Most people call it the race to the bottom.
Right.
I mean, I see clubs, I think there's a lot of clubs where we're from that they're signing up 3 and 4 year olds. And I look at it and go, well, why are you doing that? Like, is it really, is it necessary? Is it a money thing? Are you really trying to teach those kids physical literacy and ball control at 3 and 4 years old, or is it just a way to finance your club?
I'm not gonna answer that, John. But I think you and I know, you know where we're leaning towards that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, kids at that age, they just need to play, man. Just let them play. There's so many things that they're gonna figure out on their own. There's so many things.
So you would never have a job back in Côte d'Ivoire doing what you're doing now, coaching, like that would not exist.
It would at the time when I grew up, that definitely would not have existed.
And now maybe in one of these academies.
Now maybe in some of those academies, but it's very different. It's very different.
Let's jump from the bottom level. I want to learn a little bit about the top level.
Mm-hmm.
So what does the professional game in Côte d'Ivoire look like? Do you have a professional league? How many teams? How many divisions?
There's a professional league. I think they have 3 divisions, but don't take my word on that. I think they have 3 divisions. Like I say, there's one big club, which is ASEC Mimosa, which is a team that really produced most of the biggest talents there. And there was a point where they were always winning. Now it's fluctuating, right? Because now what happens is, as soon as they produce a very good player, they'll lose that player. Going to Europe, going somewhere in Belgium, I think they have a strong tie with a Belgian club. I want to say Lokeren, maybe. And so now it's creating the situation where I think it's actually good. It's creating a situation where there's competition.
How long has your professional league there been established? Was it around when you were a kid?
It was around when I was a kid.
What's that, like 20 years ago?
Yeah.
And is there promotion relegation between the divisions?
Of course there is. That's part of it. Of course there is.
I had to set that one up too.
Come on, John. It's unique what we see, the playoff system and the fact that you're gonna win the regular season and then lose in the playoff, right? But I think it's the American model.
Yeah.
Right.
Which kind of is filtered down to the youth system, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how youth clubs are run as well. There's very little competition based on merit. It's whether you can. It seems to be who's the biggest, who's got the most money, who can buy in. What about? Do you know much about or anything about coach education in? Like who's coaching in Côte d'Ivoire? Is it just former players or?
You'll definitely former players get involved. You'll also see a lot of the older heads, so the older coaches usually place people in certain positions.
Okay.
That's what you usually see. I'm not very familiar with the coaching education system, to be honest.
Okay. All right, let's jump across to this side. Who are you? What age group are you coaching right now?
Right now, I'm coaching 3 teams: U13, U14, U15, all girls.
Okay. Is that by choice, or how did you end up on the? Is there a boys' side of your club and a girls' side of your club?
There is a boys' side. I am used to coaching girls. I've been coaching since 2009. I've coached a lot of girls' team. I'm very. I think that I just get girls. I'm very happy working with them. It's very different than coaching boys. Very, very different. And I can do both, really. So what happens is, most of the places where I ended up going, it was situations where maybe someone didn't want to coach a girls team and they were looking for a coach that wanted to coach a girls team.
What some of the what are some of the differences? You say it's very different, which I agree with. In your experience, what are the differences, and how do you? So for anybody, so any new coaches out there, grassroots coaches, what advice would you give them if they've typically, let's say I've typically coached boys and now I'm going to get given girls teams? What advice would you give me starting out? What mistakes should I avoid with the girls?
The biggest thing that I would say with the girls, I think you gotta earn the trust first. I think you gotta earn the trust first. I think they have to know that you are there for them. They have to know that you are in it for them to get better. And they have to know, for me, that's a very important one.
Is that not the same for boys though?
It's not that it's not the same for boys, but I think that boys have boys just have that confidence.
Okay.
That I think girls don't necessarily have right away, especially when it comes to me coaching a girls team for the first time. Right. I think boys just have that confidence that the girls don't. And so what you see is
why do you think that is?
That's a good question, John. I can't tell you that I have an answer for it. I think I don't know if I'm sure that it's linked to the cultural upbringing and the way we're raising boys and girls. I'm 100% sure. I mean, this is something that I hear from my wife very often, right? The idea that there's something wrong with the idea that boys have to be strong and boys have to be, right? Like we have all those cliches, mm-hmm. right? In the societies that we live in, where boys have to be strong, boys have to be manly, right? Like boys don't cry, and girls have to do this.
I'm crying all the time, mate, with my job.
Right, and so listen, that's what I'm thinking, John. I'm thinking that and that's really historical, right? Like that's something that I can't tell you where that started first, right? Like
that's interesting.
All those cliches, right? Like boys are blue and girls are pink, and right, like all those cliches that have been created, and of course now you have people buying into that, right? And
yeah, I think we need to not celebrate, but I think we should be aware of the differences. Obviously, we want to narrow that gap, right? Between,
right.
I think opportunity, definitely.
Right, and so John, I think that that's a fundamental difference. And so listen, I was very fortunate to have a chance to do an interview with Coach Anson Dorrance with North Carolina. And he was talking about some of those things as well. And the idea, for example, of competition, right? Where boys are gonna go 1v1 all day against each other, right? Challenge each other, try to push each other, try to beat each other, whatever, right? Girls are not gonna do that. You gotta push them to do that. Real story, John. Real story. When was that? It was a couple of days ago. On Monday, I had a team practice with one of my girls' team. Okay, I set up 4 fields, small-sided games. It was on 3 fields. It was 2v2s. Mm-hmm. So 2v2s on 3 fields, and I had 2 players left. So on the 4th field, I said, "Hey, listen, it's only 2 of you guys. You're both gonna go over there, and you're gonna play 1v1." They go and they play 1v1 for 1 minute, and they come back to me, and they're telling me, "Hey, coach, playing 1v1 is not fun because we have to go at each other and we have to challenge each other, and we don't like that. We want to be moved to a field where maybe we are neutrals," right? And that made me laugh, but that for me is something else, right? Where that's a fundamental difference between girls and boys. And again, I think it's been created by the idea that, right, like competition is okay for boys, right? But somehow if you have a girl player, that's very competitive, somehow maybe she's worried about how the other players around her are gonna perceive her or are gonna feel about her. And so I think it's so many of those things. I'm not an expert, but I'm speaking based on what I've been around and what I've seen.
Well, I think you are an expert if you've got a lot of personal experience with it. That's what makes it an expert. So if I understand correctly, one of the things that you're going to encourage me as a new grassroots coach with girls is that I will need to put more of a focus and more encouragement on 1v1 skills and that aspect. So you're saying in your experience, girls typically are going to need to be encouraged to do that more.
Yep. You're gonna basically have to make your group understand that it's okay to compete. It's okay to compete against each other, right? And it's a challenge that you're gonna have. You're gonna have, because it's a totally different dynamic, right? Where I don't want to say that feelings don't matter for the boys, but feelings are the idea of feelings, and how that's a lot more stronger in the girls group, right? Where players have to get along, players have to trust each other, right? For them to be able to even do certain things on the field, they have to be able to trust the other girl or trust the other player, right? And I think that that's something that you see less on the boys' side. I think on the boys' side, I think it's listen, I'm gonna compete with you. I'm gonna go at you for the next 2 minutes or 3 minutes if we're playing 1v1. And when we're done, we're done. We're done. You know, like, well done, whatever. If you beat me, good for you. If I beat you, hey, I'm the man. We move on. You know, there's no feelings left. There's no. I think that's very, very different.
What's your next piece of advice for me with coaching girls? Different from what's something that I'm gonna want to do differently?
What I think that when and again, not that it's not important for boys, but I think that the way you are going to approach mistakes, when girls make a mistake, I think that's going to determine, that's going to put you in the right place or in the wrong place.
So explain for new people, like, what's the difference going to be between, so if I've been coaching the boys and they make a mistake, what's the difference going to be when I coach? What's the reaction, and how would you advise I deal with it better?
John, generally speaking, again, I want to make sure that I'm saying generally speaking, because I don't want it to be all the boys do this and all the girls do that. Generally speaking, I find that boys have been able to, I want to say, handle criticism, but I've been able to
got a bit thicker skin, maybe.
Right, exactly, right. Like, have thicker skin of saying that, like, hey, you know, like, I messed this up. You know what I mean? I'm going again, right? And I think that your intervention and the way you are going to talk to that player, I think when it comes to a girl, I think things have to be a little bit different, because you have to know, again, that it's different. It's not, first of all, it's not the same kid. So sometimes even with the boys, you have to make that adjustment, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, we're just talking in general, right? I mean,
exactly. Like,
because I don't think you can. I mean, I'm very big advocate on equal opportunity and treating people similar, but I don't think you can coach young girls the same way you can coach young boys. There's definitely it's a fine line, but you can't just take how you coach U13, 14, 15 boys and go coach girls the same. They're not the same.
Very different.
And I think one of the things that, I find there's a difference in the way that the girls, I find there's a difference when there's a mistake or something happens on the field. with the ownership of mistakes? Do you find that versus, to me, like boys, typically, boys, it's everyone else's fault, and girls, it's always
It's
their
always
fault.
their fault. That's very true.
Even if they were nothing to do with it.
That's very true. That is very true, John. The number of times I have to ask a player on the girl side to just stop apologizing. It's like stop. Just stop apologizing. Just play. Whatever happened, just play. It wasn't even your fault in the first place, like you said, right? Just play.
So how do I address that? Like, what can I do to change the environment? And like, is it more talking one-on-one with the girls? Is it talking as a group? Because I mean, when I coach girls, I don't get this feeling as well. Another difference I kind of see is, I don't know if you've seen it as well, but with the boys, when there's a mistake, it's kind of like all the boys are pissed off with the one kid who made the mistake.
Right.
But with the girls, that dynamic doesn't seem as, it's not on display as much if it happens at all. Is that your experience?
Yeah. So it's my experience too, John, and it's the way that they also, that's back to the dynamics. It's the way that they also express their feelings, right? Where the boys is gonna come out right away, right? Boom. And maybe somebody will say that's good, maybe somebody that say no, it shouldn't, right? With the girls, maybe it's not gonna come out, and then you're gonna find out 6 months later that these two players really don't like each other, right?
Yeah.
Right. But no words are spoken, or so it's just very, very different. And I think that, again, I'm not saying that it's not important on the boys' side, but I think on the girls' side, I think it's very important for a coach to really be in tune with every single player, and to really be in tune with the group as a whole, to kind of know, right? Like, to kind of even try to anticipate things sometimes, right? You have to do that. And again, I'm going to continue to say that. Of course, you have to do that on the boys' side as well, right? Because of course, if you're anticipating problems, then you're not surprised when something comes. But I think on the girls' side is huge. You just have to make the players trust you, John. And sometimes you have to go the extra mile. Like, listen, I've been to school plays for some of the girls that I've coached before.
Man, that is going the extra mile.
Right. And once you do that, how is that player ever gonna think that you don't care? Right? Like, that's not gonna happen. That's not gonna happen again.
Is there,
you know what I mean?
Sorry. Is there an aspect of the game that you find easier to coach girls? Like maybe something, I don't know, either like something technically, or even like the technical versus the tactical aspect? Like, is there certain things that you find girls are easier to coach at, or flip side, or something that they're struggle with coaching them?
From my experience, again, John, generally speaking, I'm giving respect to everybody out there, to all the boys listening and all the men listening. But generally speaking, I think that overall, girls are 100% more coachable than the boys. 100% for me. That's my experience. 100%. As in, if the moment is gonna, and maybe you can say it's not a bad thing, right? Like, boys are just gonna do their thing. You know what I mean? They're just gonna do their thing. Usually, what has happened to me in overall looking at my experience, is that the girls team that I have coached have done a better job at playing the way I want them to play. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. They've done a better job at playing exactly the way I want them to play. Now, maybe somebody will argue that's not good, right? Maybe somebody would say, hey, you need to be able to play in a different way, whatever, and I understand that. But generally speaking,
I think what you're saying is that the girls have more of a, the girls seem to be able to separate the result from the performance a lot easier. Not that they don't care, but I would agree that if they lose, they can understand that they played well or they did good things. Whereas the boys, I have many boys teams that if they lose, even if they played the most fantastic game, it was horrible. It was shit. It was terrible. We played awful.
Yeah, no,
I think that's a hard message to get across to boys is the performance was good. I'm happy about what you guys did on the field. I'm not so concerned about the outcome. Whereas maybe the girls is a little bit more on the other side, which is they don't get upset enough about the result sometimes.
Right. No, that's fair. From my experience, for sure, I find that the girls team that I coach have been more successful at sticking to the plan. They've been more successful at saying, hey, this is how we want to play and this is how we're gonna play. Whereas sometimes on the boys side, I've had a number of boys teams where those moments were there, but then when there were also a lot of moments when it was like, really? Why? You know? But again, right? I can receive the argument, right? That maybe that's not a bad thing, right? And that's the differences. For me, that's the differences. But someone that's coming in needs to know that.
What let's talk a little bit quickly about sort of technical skills. What would you advise that I work more on with the girls' side than maybe I'm used to on the boys? What am I going to have to put a little more focus on when I move into maybe coaching the girls' side? What do you feel? What's important? What do we need to help them more with?
So listen, John, I think obviously from a technical standpoint, obviously you want to get every player comfortable with the ball, right? You want to do that. What I've noticed is I've noticed that more on the girl side than on the boy side. I've noticed that there are a lot more players that don't want the ball.
Okay.
Right, like I've noticed the number of times where I've had to make those comments at practice of saying, hey, you do know that it's okay for you to keep the ball, right? Like it doesn't have to be, hey, ball touches my feet and then I just give it up. So I think
what would be some, could you give me a couple of ideas on sort of activities or things that I could do with a group of girls to help that?
John, I'm big on 1v1s.
Okay.
I'm big on 1v1s, 2v1s, 2v2s, those small numbers activities. I'm big on them because my approach is that in those activities you can't hide. You can't hide in those activities, right? Like you can hide in a 7v7 game, you can hide in a 11v11 game. In a 1v1 game or in a 2v1 game, 2v2, you can't hide.
Yeah, like I'm having exactly this, not the same problem, but I'm facing the same challenge. I have some U13 girls as well that I'm involved with, and some of them are petrified of the ball. I've gone to the a lot of coaches will talk about restricting touches. I have certain not restrictions. I have certain conditions with certain players that you must, when you get the ball, you must touch it 5 times.
Right.
I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, you touch it 5 times. Dribble it, touch it, like shield it, hide it, don't care. But before you can get rid of it, pass it, 5 touches.
Yeah. No, definitely. And that's universal, right? You want, there's only one ball in this game, right? You want everybody, people that are involved, you want everybody to be very comfortable with the ball, right? To be very confident on the ball. Right, but I think the other thing that I can think about, John, thing that I can think about for girls is and again, that's something that came up when I was talking to Coach Dorrance is the shooting, because this is what happens. Again, this is my experience coaching boys team and girls team. This is what happens. Boys are gonna get to the field, and then boom, they're just gonna start shooting, right? To the point where sometimes some coaches are even fighting it and are saying, hey, you got to do technical stuff, right? Like you got to juggle, you got to do it. But that's normal for boys. They get into the field. Hey, somebody, even if I'm not a goalkeeper, I'm there with my friend. I'm going in the goal. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Right? Girls don't do that. They get to the field. It's a little bit more everybody to themselves or socializing, right? But socializing as in talking. Talking about whatever happened at school, right? And so what you see is you don't see the same type of ball strikers with the boys as you see with the girls, right? But it's very simple. It's just because they're just the repetitions. They don't have enough of the repetitions. Now I understand that could be very challenging for some coaches based on the environment, right? If you're in an environment where maybe you don't have goals and all that stuff, yeah. But I still think you can be creative with that. But I think there is a need for ball striking. The importance of ball striking on the girl side, I think, is very important.
So the main things I'm going to want to focus on are learning to shoot and strike a ball better, how to keep the ball, and you're doing that through a lot of 1v1 activities. Yep. Now, yep. Your 1v1 activities, is it just about beating someone, or is it also about like being comfortable to keep the ball under pressure?
There's a mix of both.
Yeah.
I do a mix of both. I would have an activity where it's just, hey, you're in the box. 1v1, you got to keep the ball. You got 30 seconds. At the end of the 30 seconds, whoever has the ball wins. I'll do an activity like that. Sometimes I'll make it a 2v1. So now all of a sudden you're working on, right, like, when can I keep it? When I have the pressure, can I recognize the other player working on movements a little bit? Right, and I'll do a mix of both. And then I also have the 1v1, of course, where you're going to go.
Do you find the communication on the field is better than boys, or the same, or?
From my experience, it's not.
Less?
From my experience, it's not. But this is what happens, John. Again, I was having a conversation recently with a friend about that. I think that this is something that you hear. This is something very classic that you hear, right? Like communication. We're not communicating enough, right? Like I know, for me, I have a player there's a player in one of my girls' team that is literally every comment at halftime. Because at halftime I love to give it to them and hear them. And so at halftime is the same girl. Every time she raises her hand, I tell everybody, hey, I know what she's gonna say, and then she says the same thing right away, right? We're not talking enough. But I think just with the communication, I think that we as coaches are guilty of that, because I think we often come in and assume that players are going to know exactly how to communicate and what to say. And when player A says something to player B is gonna understand it exactly. I think that that's a big assumption, and I think that instead of just saying, hey, we need to communicate better, I think that perhaps as coaches, and that's something that for me, that's something that I want to try. That's something that I definitely want to try with one of my teams, is to say, hey, is to have a moment, and right now things are crazy right now, obviously, because of Corona, but it's to have a moment where we can say, hey, we talk about communication, right? Let's sit down and let's write some words. When player A says this, what are we gonna do? Boom. Almost this idea of creating our own communication, so that now
your own language.
Right. Creating a language, right? So that players kind of, go with the idea that like, hey, now this is ours. Let's go with it. Let's. It's very clear now that when we say this word, boom, everybody should recognize it, should be able to apply this principle because we talked about it.
I think that's something in general as coaches that we could do a much better job of with grassroots players, right? Is if we're going to use certain terminology, really making sure that, I'm always trying to be more conscious of this when I'm talking to young players, right? And I say, okay, like for example, when the ball goes out for a goal kick, I want you to get wide, right? And then I'm always thinking with this 7-year-old, like, do you understand, what does that mean to you? When I say that, what does that mean? He says, well, I should go and get over there. Okay, but how far should you go over there? So it's always, I think it's something like you're talking about, is getting everybody in the team talking the same language, because what it might mean to Megan is not what it means to, to Charlotte. So yeah, that's that'll be an interesting. Maybe what you should do is give them a list of terms and ask them to fill it out. Right, this equals what? What does that mean to you?
Exactly.
And then have a look at those.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna wrap this up for now, if you don't mind, Ibra. I'm gonna jump on another one, but
sounds good, John.
I would I'd like to do another one in the near future, and maybe focus a lot more on some of these topics related around coaching girls, and maybe have a little discussion on ideas on how we can do better, how we can improve what we're doing with these girls groups. So
sounds good, John. John, thank you so much for having me, man. Keep doing your thing. I'm listening to all those conversations, man. Great stuff.
Good. You're the one person then. Ibra, enjoy your weekend. If you're coaching at all, hope all goes well. I'll catch up and send you a DM, and we'll book up another one. I really enjoyed. Thanks for teaching us all about Ivorian football today.
Sounds good.
I gotta go look up Asek Mimosa.
Asek Mimosa, yeah.
Is that ASEKME?
It's ASEC.
C.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna post something. I'm gonna post that on something today.
Okay.
About Asek Mimosa when I'm done.
Awesome.
Brother, thank you very much for the chat and your time.
Not a problem.
Be safe. Take care.